Bonjour, bonjour, and welcome to episode 8 of Paris in Bleu, Blanc, Rouge. This week, I am going to share the story of a woman that was an incredible artist and is also known for being the subject of another incredible artist. And there's actually an exhibition going on in the United States right now that features the two together. But she deserves all of her own attention and all the accolades because she was pretty incredible. It's Tuesday morning here in Paris, and it is blue sky and beautiful and sunny, and it's incredible, especially after the last few weeks of all the rain and the sun getting really high. The sun is going back to normal. I saw a few boats actually going down the river today, which we haven't seen in quite a few weeks. And it's supposed to be kind of that nice faux spring, they call it, that's tricking all the trees and everything to bloom. So hopefully it just means a nice early spring before the actual first day of spring. And it continues on like this. But usually there's always that time that we get another little week or so of cold, but hopefully not, because we don't want that to hit the vines of France that make all of our amazing wine. But let's jump in today. I am going to share the story with you of Berthe Morisot. And Berthe Morisot was just an amazing woman. She was one of the few women of the Impressionist movement. With her dark locks and her stunning gaze, she was the perfect model for Édouard Manet. However, unlike most of the female models turned artists, she is actually known as being one of the first incredible female Impressionists. She was born on January 14th, 1841 in Bourges to her mother, Marie Corneille Thomas Morisot, and her father, Edmé Théberus Morisot. He was a prefect and an architect. Berthe is the youngest of three daughters. Her older sister, Yves, was born in 1838, and her other sister, Edma, born in 1839, which we'll learn a lot more about. Her younger brother, Théberus, was born in 1845. Due to her father's role in the government, the family constantly was moving from Bourges to Limoges, Paris, Cannes, Rennes, and finally back on July 3rd, 1852, back to Paris into the city of Passy on the edge of Paris at the time, now part of Paris. In 1857, Marie Corneille, often referred to as the great niece of Rococo master Jean-Honoré Fragonard, but most historians actually can't find a link to that today, but it still gets mentioned, enrolled her three young daughters into a drawing class of Geoffroy-Alphonse Chacun, who taught many young girls who weren't allowed to go to the École des Beaux-Arts. The two youngest Morisot girls quickly outgrew the drawing lessons of Chacun and moved into the atelier of Joseph Guichard. Guichard had arrived in Paris in 1822 from Lyon at 16 and visited the salon held in the Salon Carré at the Louvre. At first sight of the Delacroix, Virgil, and Dante, he knew that was the direction for him. He first joined the Atelier of Ingres, focusing on the academic style, but his heart was drawn to the styles of Delacroix and Rubens, enraging Ingres. Guichard was very impressed with the talents of Edma and Berthe and focused more of his time on sharing art and the Italian greats within the Louvre. At this time, many of the artists of Paris flocked to the Louvre to recreate the masters. Women had few options in those days. Not allowed to attend the École des Beaux-Arts, they couldn't be alone in an atelier with a man or a nude male model, and couldn't even visit the Louvre without a chaperone. Since the Louvre opened in 1793, there has been a lot of focus on the training of artists. During the opening years under the revolutionary calendar of the 10-day week, the Louvre was open 3 of those days only for the artists. They could freely set up the easel in front of one of the masters in the Grand Gallery and copy each detail. Copyists became so popular that in 1872, for just under 2 years, the Musée des Copies was opened in the Palais de l'Industrie on the Champs-Élysées. The first exhibit included 130 paintings copied from the Italian masters of European museums and the Vatican. The idea came from Charles Blanc and most likely included many of the works of the once unknown Impressionist artists. Today, you could still be a copyist within the Louvre, but you have to jump through many hoops to get the chance. You have to be a talented artist, of course. You can't copy the size or the signature, and they limit the options of what you could copy. No longer will you find an artist in front of a Titian like Berthe and Edma would have. It's far too crowded in the Salle des États due to the lady of the Louvre that resides there. And the waiting list is quite long, at least 3 years. But I do love coming upon them and watching their progression through multiple visits. The earliest painting in the hand of Berthe that still survives today, The Farm in Normandy, was created in 1857 and is in a private collection. The countryside and landscape drew Berthe and Edma in, and Guichard felt he had taught them all he could and suggested that they go study with Jean-Baptiste Camille Corot in 1860. Long spring and summer days were spent outside in the Ville d'Avray painting the horizon. A few years later, in 1863, Corot introduced the sisters to his student Achille Oudinot. Oudinot and Morisot girls spent time outside of Paris in Auvers-sur-Loire 3 decades before Vincent van Gogh would arrive and spend his eternal life. Returning often to the Louvre, since they had registered as copyists in 1858, Berthe and Edma drifted to the Venetian arts and Rubens and the eruption of color. It was in front of one of the Rubens' 24 paintings of the life of Marie de Medici in 1868 that Édouard Manet came into their lives. Manet shared a bond with the artist Henri Fantin-Latour, who had both been rejected from the Salon. Fantin-Latour might not be as well known as Édouard Manet today, but his paintings of flowers and his group portraits that can be found in the Orsay are some of my favorites. As part of the Batillon group, you can only imagine the conversation one morning over coffee between Manet and Fantin-Latour at the Café Gerbois on the Avenue de Clichy. Henry had told Manet about the 2 young girls who had already been displayed in the salon and would propose that they visit them inside the Louvre. There are multiple versions of this story, but I'm choosing to stick with the version told by the Morisot family that dates the meeting to August 1868. In a letter dated August 26, 1868, from Manet to Fantin-Latour, the artist said, "The young Morisot ladies are charming. It's a bother they're not men. But as women, they could still serve the cause of painting by marrying an academician each. Give them my compliments." Now, just remember the time there before, you panic about, because it's in this day and age, it's not looked on very well that he said what he said. But you also have to remember what women could actually do back at this time. At first, Manet was enamored with Edma, but it was the haunting, deep, dark looks and the gaze of Berthe that pulled him in. Following a trip to Spain, Manet fell in love with the works of Velázquez and Goya and the dark features of the Spanish subjects. Morisot's deep-set black eyes and hair reminded him of the exotic Maja at the Balcony by Goya, painted in 1808. Following Manet's shock of the Parisian Salon of 1865 with Olympia and Déjeuner sur l'Herbe, he was looking for a new model, and Berthe would be everything he wanted. In 1868, Manet painted the balcony, which Berthe would pose after much apprehension. Being a model for an artist was not a profession for a woman of society at the time. After much convincing, Berthe agreed, as she would just be part of a group in the portrait. The man in the center is the artist and friend Antoine Guillaume, a landscape painter who studied under Corot and Courbet, would become one of the leaders in the transition from realism to impressionism. Unfortunately, Guillaume is remembered more for being in this painting than his own work. The lovely lady is Fanny Clos, a violinist and close friend of Manet's wife, Suzanne. Fanny was the first all-female string quartet, but in this painting, she holds an umbrella. Her husband, Pierre's family, made their fortunes in umbrellas and sculpted the handles for many of the high-end pieces. Manet painted her holding a green umbrella, thus adding a touch of his friend Pierre as well. In the dark background to the left, you could spot Manet's wife, Suzanne's son, Léon. There's a whole controversy of who is the father, and I don't think we'll ever know. Bringing some drinks to the disconnected trio. Manet even added in his beloved dog Tama next to the porcelain planter with a blue hydrangea that blends so well with the green shutters and railing. And that is where the art elite drew the line. They couldn't stand the acid green color, and the 3 main subjects look more like still lifes than friends. One critic even reduced Manet to a house painter. Appearing in the Salon of 1869, he didn't attract a single buyer. Manet kept it in his studio until the day he died in 1884. Fellow artist Gustav Caillebotte brought it and kept it until his own death, when it was given to the state and found its eventual home in the Musée d'Orsay. From this point on, the lives of Morisot and Manet families would be deeply entwined. Weekly dinners at the Morisot family home with many of the other Parisian artists, Degas, Zachary Astruc, and Pierre Puvet de Chavon. Berthe lost her closest painting companion, her sister Edma, when she married Adolphe Pantillon, a good friend of Manet's, on March 8, 1869. The couple moved to Lorient and Brittany, where they started a family. Letters from Edma to her sister ache with her boredom and with her wish that she could return to painting. Berthe visited her often and would capture her many times, and is one of the most iconic works. In 1872, Berthe painted the cradle, with Edma looking into the white lace-draped cradle with her daughter Blanche sleeping. It's held today in the Orsay. In an August 1871 letter to her sister, Edma, Berthe said, "Once again, Manet finds me not so ugly and would like to have me back as a model." In the end, out of boredom, I suggested it myself. From 1868 to 1874, Manet captured Morisot on canvas and in drawings numerous times. Morisot said, "Manet's charming wit kept me alert through the long hours. As they sat, she soaked up all his wisdom and advice for her own adventure in art." The year 1874 was a big one for Berthe. At the start of the year, on January 24th, she lost her beloved father. Manet would capture her in Berthe Morisot in Mourning the same year in his somber, quickly dashed painting, which is held today in a private collection. There's always been a lot of speculation on the relationship between Berthe and Edward. Many of the model-to-painter dynamics ended in a physical relationship. However, these two had a deeper and more intimate non-sexual relationship based on respect, love, creativity, and a mutual inspiration that would continue until his last breath. Well, Berthe's two sisters, named Claudine, after her great-grandmother. Being a female artist in the 19th century wasn't easy. It was looked down upon, and if they were to marry, they needed to give up their craft and raise a family. Berthe had no desire to settle down and wanted to keep her independence. In May of 1869, she had told her sister Edma that she had an increased desire to have children. An early suitor was Pierre Puvet de Chavon, when Manet tried to encourage to no avail. Between August and September 1869, the Morisot and the Manet families spent time in Fécamp. Edward Manet missed this trip, but his brother Eugène arrived with his own canvases. Berthe and Eugène spent time on the coastline painting the horizon and in the villa by the sea with Edma as a model once again. It was far from love at first sight for these two. Edma's admission of married life being the most boring thing in existence was constantly repeated in Berthe's head, although eventually Eugène, or more likely her closeness to Edward, wore her down. On December 22, 1874, Berthe and Eugène were married in Passy. She would forever be attached to the Manet family, but she'd never give up her name. Marrying a man who was an artist as well as the brother of an artist was the wise move, as it came with an understanding of her world. Eugène became a model of her paintings and gardens, looking out windows, and eventually as a father. Although the biggest event of 1874 was also the first exposition of the Impressionist painters at 35 Boulevard des Capucines in the former studio of photographer Nadar. In February 1874, Edgar Degas invited Morisot to join the Society of the Anonymous Artists, Painters, Sculptors, and Engravers, a group of artists who are being turned away from the official salon. On April 15, 1874, 31 artists exhibited. Morisot was the only woman, alongside Monet, Degas, Pissarro, Sisley, Cézanne, and Monet, but never Manet. The exhibit ran for 1 month, concluding on May 15th, and 3,510 visitors mostly came to make fun of the event. With 10 pieces on display, Berthe would leave a lasting impression on visitors, but the exhibit was a failure. Only 4 paintings were sold, and none of them were Morisot's. The academic salon opened May 1st, and Manet's Railway was included. While you stayed away from the group that would garner the name Impressionism from a painting by Monet shown in Nadar's studio. In March of 1875, at an auction at the Drouot auction house, 12 of her works were up for sale alongside Monet, Renoir, and Sisley. It caused a scandal, and one viewer even called her a prostitute. Fellow artist and friend Camille Pissarro took such offense that he punched the man in the nose. In the end, her paintings sold better than theirs, with some notable buyers: Ernest Hochedet, Henri Rouart, and her brother-in-law Gustave Manet. Four female artists broke into the Impressionist movement: Mary Cassatt, Eva Gonzalez, Mary Bracamont, and Berthe. They are all still remembered today. As you can imagine, they gave their paintings a softer look and give an insight into domestic life. Few were better than Morisot, though, and in 1878 she turned her attention to a new subject, her daughter. On November 14, 1878, her first and only child, Julie Manet, was born. Berthe documented her life from time she was 15 months old. Suffering after the birth, Berthe underwent many health issues and took a break from painting until April of 1879. Through her canvases, we could see Julie grow up to be a beautiful young woman. In 2021, the Musée Marmottan Monet held an exhibit dedicated to Julie and her life as a child of Impressionism. It was incredible, and I highly advise also reading her published diaries, but we'll have more on Julie next week. Berthe continued to take part on the Impressionist exhibitions, joining all but one of the 8 exhibitions between 1874 and 1886. Motherhood didn't slow her down. She now produced paintings from her studio with Julie and domestic life as the main subjects. The entire Manet family was dealt a blow on April 30th, 1883, when Edward died. His last years were filled with suffering from the symptoms of syphilis. His gangrenous left foot was amputated on April 19, 1883, just 11 days before he died. Refusing his last rites, he was surrounded by his wife Suzanne and loved ones, including Berthe, Julie, and Eugène. He died in his home on the Rue de St. Petersburg in the 8th, 20 years to the day that Le Déjeuner sur l'Herbe was shown at the Salon des Refusés. On January 5, 1884, a massive retrospective exhibit of Manet's work appeared at the École des Beaux-Arts, including Déjeuner, Olympia, and his last painting, A Bar at the Folies Bergère. On February 4th and 5th, the remaining contents of his studio were sold at auction at the Hotel Drouot. Morisot and her husband bought 8 pieces, and other members of the Manet family grabbed many of them. The sale was a disaster, and many went for next to nothing. With the loss of her mentor and friend, Berthe began to spend more time with Renoir, who often painted and sketched Julie. In the Orsay, Renoir's sweet portrait of Julie holding her cat always makes you smile. In Manet's lifetime, he was never one to shy away from controversy, none more so than in 1863 with the completion of Déjeuner sur l'Herbe and Olympia. After his death and the dismal success of the auction of his work, Suzanne Manet had plans to sell Olympia to a wealthy American buyer for 20,000 francs. Claude Monet led a campaign with the help of Berthe and Eugène to raise funds to purchase Olympia and urged the Musée de Luxembourg and the Louvre to step in and save the painting and keep it in France. Letters survive today, written by many of the artists, including John Singer Sargent to Monet, which was recently exhibited at the Sargent exhibit at the Orsay. A handwritten list of artists that donated, including Proust, Pissarro, Sargent, Rouart, Moreau-Nélaton, and Rodin. They raised 19,415 francs and purchased in March 1890 by the Luxembourg and now in the Musée d'Orsay, and can never leave France. The trio that was Berthe, Eugène, and Julie often spent time in the countryside, including Giverny, to visit Monet. On November 29, 1891, Berthe and Eugène purchased the Château de Ménil in Saint-Laurent in the town of Jussieu, 1 hour northwest of Paris, although she wasn't fond of the drafty 16th century chateau. When Julie was just 5 years old, Eugène Manet died of syphilis, the same thing that took his brother and his father, on April 13, 1892. He was just 59 years old, and Julie would have a wide group of uncles who would look after her. That included Degas, Monet, Renoir, and the poet Stéphane Mallarmé. They stepped in as their guardian with her mother. Julie continued to grow up on the canvases of her mother and Renoir. In 1894, Renoir painted mother and daughter together for the last time. In January 1895, Julie became quite ill with the flu. Berthe took care of her, but also caught the same illness. Berthe died on March 2, 1895, at 54 years old at number 10 Rue Hébert on the edge of Paris. It's normally mentioned that she died of pneumonia. However, it was most likely syphilis that also took the life of her husband less than 3 years before. 3 days later, Morisot was buried in the Manet family tomb at the Passy Cemetery in the Trocadero in the shadows of the Eiffel Tower. With her husband, Eugène, and brother-in-law, Edward, the two artists would spend their life there together. You could see it. It's right when you go in, you take a left, and there is a bust of Edward at the top. Julie was 17 years old, and with the help of her uncles, she would do all she could to keep the memory of her mother's legacy alive. In 1896, with the help of Monet, Renoir, and Degas, 390 of the more than 400 paintings and drawings by Berthe Morisot were brought together in the Drouin-Rouet Gallery for a Berthe Morisot retrospective. Julie became an artist in her own right and, like her mother, spent time in the Louvre as a copyist. On one visit in 1897, she met Ernest Rouard. The two married May 29, 1900. Though Julie and a large family of artists Through Julie and the large family of artists who looked after her, Berthe art lived on. Whether she was in front of or behind the canvas, she was an amazing woman who we are all lucky to have known today. You can find more of her pieces in the Orsay, the Petit Palais, and the Musée Marmottan Monet, but you could also find some of the sketches that Manet did of her as well in the Marmottan Monet, and they changed those out because they have so many. They change them out yearly. Manet's paintings that he did of Morisot, most of the ones that we know are in public spaces, but a few of them, sadly, are hidden away in private collections, but do sometimes come out when they go to exhibits. The balcony, 1868 to 1869, was purchased by Gustave Caillebotte and left to the French state and held at the Orsay today. Repose was done in 1870, the one painting Manet did of Berthe that she wanted more than any other, but she never owned it. It's now at the Rhode Island School of Design. My very favorite, which if you know me, and I have literally thousands of favorites, I would put this painting in my top 5, if not top 3 favorite paintings ever. It's Berthe Morisot with Violets. It was painted in 1872. It was purchased by Théodore Duret from Manet, who purchased my beautiful Berthe just before her death and remained in the Morisot-Rouard family until Julie's son Clement sold the painting in 1998. It was purchased with the help of the Meyer Foundation and given to the Orsay. She's currently traveling between San Francisco to Cleveland until she returns home in July. Berthe Morisot with a Muff was done in 1871, sold in February of 1884 auction, and now held in the Cleveland Museum of Art. Berthe Morisot with a Half Veiled, also 1871, also sold at that same February 1884 auction. Lives now in Geneva at the Petit Palais. Berthe with a Fan, 1872, was owned by one of my favorite collectors of all time, Etienne Moreau-Nelaton. Left it to the Louvre in 1906. His collection altered the perception of Impressionism, and it's now held in the Orsay today. And it's still there today because it can't actually leave the museum. Berthe with Pink Slippers, done in 1872, is now in the Horace Chama Museum of Art and currently in the U.S. exhibit. Berthe Morisot reclining, 1873, the only painting that Manet gave to his subject and stayed in her collection and her family until 1993 and given to the Marmottan Monet by her grandson, Denis. Berthe in Mourning, 1874, painted just after the death of her father in January 1874. It was held in the collection of Dr. Georges de Belliot and later his doctor, Victorine. It was refused by the state and the donation made in her father's name to the Marmottan Monet in 1940 and now held in private collection. That collection that this family had and what happened to it and what was included in it is a fascinating story, which I will put on my list to share with you shortly. The last painting that he did of Berthe was Berthe with a Fan, 1874. It was likely painted after her engagement with Eugène. It stayed with the Manet Morisot Rouard family until 1999, when given in lieu of inheritance taxes. Today, it's deposited in the Musée des Beaux-Arts in Lille. I've never seen that one. If you're near Cleveland, visit the Manet and Morisot exhibit that opens March 29th and runs until July 5th, and then hopefully all of my little babies come home. I'll put a link to that museum website. And if you're in that area, definitely go and let me know if you went, and send me a picture if you see my sweet baby with the violets. I did have somebody that went in San Francisco, and they sent me, I said, "Oh, is my girl there?" And they sent me pictures of her. Literally every time I go into the Orsay, I look for her, and the Orsay moves are every single week. So it's almost like a little treasure hunt. I went in this morning to go see what Berthe paintings were there. And knowing that this massive Renoir exhibit is going to open up in 2 weeks, I went up there to see maybe there's some new things in there. There's actually still a lot of Renoirs on display, but I did see a few paintings in there I hadn't seen before. And there was also a Berthe Morisot painting in there that I had not seen in the collection on display recently, and it's one that she did in the last year of her life. So I will put, make sure you follow me on Instagram. I'll put some of those on Instagram as well. But I did mention at the beginning to my little tip this week, and if you are coming to Paris after a week from today, after March 10th, there is something you need to know about the Orsay. The Orsay is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year, and they are, in celebration of that, they're going to do a massive restoration. So for beginning on March 10th and going through 2028, they didn't select a time, so I would imagine maybe December 31st, 2028, the way things work here. But they are going to, the biggest thing they're going to do is completely revamp the entrance and kind of take it back to what it used to be before it was turned into the museum. So they are changing the entrances. So if you are coming and you have a timed stamped ticket, or you are coming and you're on the Paris Museum Pass and you also have a reservation time slot for that, you will go to what they're calling the dock entrance. And the dock entrance is, say you're standing above the Seine looking at the side of the museum that runs along the quay there. And normally if you look all the way to the end of the museum on your right, that's where you go in. Now you're going to go all the way to the left, and the line will be right there on the quay. If you are a priority visitor, so you are a member in any form, carte blanche, the Friends of the Orsay, the American Friends of the Orsay, if you are somebody with disabilities, or you have a ticket without a time stamp, or you're a visitor without a ticket, you will still use the Parvis entrance, but they could flip around those entrances on the Parvis sometimes. You could be going to the left, the right, whichever, but they will have everything really well marked, and there's already a bunch of fencing getting ready to go up when I was there this morning. And if you are coming and you love the Orsay, I highly, highly recommend becoming a member. I think you could actually do it online now, which before you couldn't. But as a member, you get to go in 30 minutes before it's open to the general public. And that's what I do frequently. So I go in at 9 o'clock, and the regular crowd doesn't get to go in until 9:30. And because there's no exhibition open right now, which is what always drives the members to come, it was fantastic. I was up on the 5th floor where the Impressionists are, completely by myself for over an hour. So it was lovely and fantastic. And once you visit a museum by yourself, it's really hard to go back with being in there with the masses of people. So I definitely highly recommend that. If you are coming, buy your ticket only from the Orsay website, and I'll put a link to that under this episode as well. And if you are coming starting the 17th, and that is when 2 big Renoir exhibits are going to open within the Orsay, it's highly advised that you also book a separate timed ticket for the Renoir exhibit as well, and you'll find all of that. It's really easy to navigate. There's no extra charge just to go into the Renoir exhibit. You book your regular museum ticket, and then you select your time stamped for the Renoir exhibit. And I recommend going in and going straight to the exhibit. And if you go first thing in the morning, it's definitely the best thing to do to beat the crowds. Or go late in the day. Thursday, they're open late. The first Sunday of the month, this might even be the last. It'll end pretty soon. They don't do that in the summer. But if you go on a Sunday, which on the free Sunday, which actually I do not recommend, it's horrible. There's so many people, but you do also need to get a time ticket for that. So make sure you check out ClaudineHemingway.com, where I'll have pictures to go along with this. And if you're not, follow my Instagram, Claudine Bleu Blanc Rouge. And if you're coming to Paris and you need help planning your trip or booking a walking tour through Paris, also you can find all of that on ClaudineHemingway.com. And I will see you next week, where we're going to talk some more about Julie Manet and the Rouard family, which there is some hot gossip on some of those distant family members that come into our time now. We'll see you next week.